それほど気性の激しい女を見たことがない。
ご機嫌いかがですか？渡辺Dan desu. On today's episode of Japanese Cinema You've Never Seen, I want to do a little bit of a celebration of actress Kyo Machiko. Kyo Machiko died last week at the age of 95, and it caused me to reflect a little bit on the state of Japanese cinema. One of the sad things about Japanese cinema today is that even though there's a lot of great movies that have come out, and certainly a lot of fun ones, it doesn't have anywhere near the cultural impact that it had from the 1950s through arguably the 1970s, when Japanese movies were greeted with excitement because they were not only very different, but also had a different kind of emotional structure, a different kind of dramatic structure, and even different kinds of filmmakers. What was interesting about Kyo Machiko is that, like American sex stars, whether it be Rita Hayworth or Marilyn Monroe or Raquel Welch or other people from that era, she was sold more on her sex appeal than on her appealing to more traditional Japanese values. And this is what made her so different, because in a country that was known for having women appear, note I said appear, to be reticent and submissive, she was someone who was overtly upfront about it. She was someone who clearly was interested in the sexual side of life, not in just burying it and being all prim and proper in her kimono before she gets married or something like that. The first movie we're going to look at is Rashomon. Now, Rashomon is arguably one of the most important movies in Japanese film history because it opened the door to it in the post-war era. In 1951, Japan was still looked at as with a great deal of suspicion. There was a lot of memories of what went on during World War II and a lot of hostility still towards Japanese people in general. My parents went through a little bit of this when my dad and mom moved to New York so he could go to NYU. It's ironic because by 1954, when they actually went to Tokyo for my dad's first assignment, the attitude in New York City certainly towards Japanese people had almost done a 180, and they were widely accepted by that point. And I think movies like Rashomon and Godzilla were part of the reason for it. Now, what was weird about Rashomon is that it took the Venice Film Festival by storm. And here you had a movie that, for Japanese viewers, was something that was rather obscure. It was not very popular. It was looked at as being very artsy, very Western, being very transgressive toward what audiences were expecting from a Japanese picture. And Kyo Machiko in it was definitely positioned very unusually for a Japanese actress at that time. As you know, Rashomon is a film that takes the same event, a bandit accosts a samurai and his bride, and offers them a chance to make money and to undig a treasure. And what ends up happening is he ends up raping the woman and killing the samurai. This story ends up being told by multiple different perspectives. Once from a woodcutter who happened to be going by, once from Mifune Toshiro, who played the bandit in the wildly unkempt performance, which also was very unusual for Japanese actors at that time, who were used to being very formal. And your samurai movies were all full of people who looked like they spent 5 hours in hair and makeup before they went out to fight a battle that was very bloody. But here he was very raggled and you know, kind of sexy in that dishevelment. Meanwhile, a samurai did have all of those traditional looks. The character who is the most interesting of these is Kyo Machiko, because she plays the woman as someone who is active in her own situation. And not only is she active, she gets to present herself in a variety of different attitudes. For example, at the very in the first iteration of the story, she's very passive. She's there looking beautiful. She's there looking very much the ideal of what a woman should be. And we understand why Mifune, as a bandit, would be so attracted to her. She's everything that he probably wants and knows he can't get, but she's also distant. So when he makes his move on her, she's very victimized. She adopts a traditional Japanese woman type persona of crying, of being gentle. But later on, we get to see her acting that role with different attitudes. In the moment when the samurai comes back as a ghost and speaks through a soothsayer and talks about his impression of it, the woman is clearly attracted to Mifune, and not only is she clearly attracted to him, she demeans the samurai. She's someone who is aggressively sexual. She's someone who is disappointing to him, and when he's totally cuckolded, when she runs away with the samurai, with the bandit, he's so devastated that he feels he has no choice but to commit suicide by losing his strength as a warrior. Wow, what a bunch of roles for her. What a difference that makes. I have problems with Rashomon. I mean, I appreciate it. I love what it meant historically. If for no other reason, I brought in Godzilla, it opened the doors for a movie like Godzilla to be made. But one of the things that irritated me about it was that it had another trick that Kurosawa had. He embraced kind of the Italian neorealist and American Lana Turner movie style of doing melodrama and having noble moments happen at the end, noble moments that we didn't really want or ask for. So at the end of the movie, with everyone being in despair, with no one being able to figure out what's the real story, instead of coming up with a way to explain it, instead of coming up with some kind of a closure, the men who are at the ruined Rashomon temple end up discovering a baby, and the farmer who it turned out, or the woodcutter who it turned out had actually stolen the samurai's knife. Oh, okay, so now we have moral relativism. Rescues the baby. He asks if he can take care of it, and because of that, the monk gets his faith in humanity restored. Please. That's something that I would expect someone like Stanley Kramer to come up with, not someone who's making a movie that's testing our sensibilities, that's testing our boundaries. And because of that, I find Rashomon to be more interesting in theory than in practice. Now, jumping off from Kurosawa Akira, let's move over to Ozu Yasujiro. Now, if Kurosawa is the most atypical Japanese filmmaker, then Ozu Yasujiro is perhaps the most typical. He tries to capture the Japanese sensibility of life, the Japanese sensibility of acceptance in all of his movies. And Ukigusa, Floating Weeds, which was a remake of a movie that he made as a silent, is one of his least common movies. And in fact, it's one of his movies that, in the same way that I'm kind of not that keen on Rashomon, I'm not that keen on this one either. But it's very interesting for the way he positions Kyo Machiko. The story is all about Nakamura Ganjiro, a really popular actor who, in the movie, his character is an actor who's returning to a small town to put on a more or less third-rate kabuki show. And there's a secret. He had been through the town multiple years before, about 20 years before, and he'd fallen in love with a local girl, and they'd had a child. Now, he had kept on the road, and the child had grown up, and he'd been sending money all along. But a lot of the other people in the troupe know nothing about this, and they know nothing about his ulterior motive of coming to the town. And sure enough, once they get into the town, we see that he meets the woman and he meets the son, but the son thinks he's an uncle. He thinks he's the mother's brother. So and that his real father had died. So we know that there's going to be something that comes up. But we also know that is typical in an Ozu movie, the dramatic scenes, the scenes where in an American movie you would have Bette Davis really tearing down the curtains and chewing them up. That it's not going to be that way. It's going to be all alluded to. For example, we don't even know that he's been paying for his son until he just kind of makes a casual remark. One of the members of his troupe is his mistress, and his mistress is played by Kyo Machiko. And in this, she plays someone who doesn't care she's not married. She and he have kind of an open relationship, which at that time in Japan, just like at that time in the United States, which was in the Doris Day era of pillow talk, it was not something you did. It proved that you were a floating weed, that you were a nagaremono, that you were someone who didn't really have necessarily a great value system. But they're comfortable with each other. They understand each other. However, once Kyo Machiko becomes aware that he has this son, that he's kept an entire part of his life secret, and she gets jealous of the woman who gave birth to the son, and when she sees her coming to the play, she can almost not control herself. And she does something that an American actress and other Japanese actresses wouldn't do. She risks putting her name on the line, her dignity on the line, by going to the house where she knows Nakamura is, and where she knows the wife and the son are, and confronts them.
あんたのお父さんどういう人？何してる人？
おい、何
慌ててんねや。おかみさんも息子さんもってお楽しみですな。なおかみさん。
さあ帰る。
うち親子に言うてやりたいことあんねや。話せんかい。話せ。
あお、何言う。来い。
話せ。
じゃあ来い。
Kyo Machiko, because they haven't been working so much, does something nefarious and not really pleasant. She tries to pay one of the younger girls in the troupe to make goo-goo eyes at his son, Kiyoshi. And the girl does, only she finds herself attracted to Kiyoshi, and he finds himself attracted to her. Now, even though this is something that Nakamura had done in his past, he does not want his son to go down the same road that he did. So he tries to not let the relationship happen. And Kyo Machiko gets to realize that what she started to do as almost a revengeful joke is now backfiring and actually hurting people. And like a typical Ozu movie, there is no easy solution. At the very end, Nakamura, not having any more money to go anyplace, might have to go on the road again and just be a drifter on his own. And he's not willing to stay in the town because he wants to give them their dignity. He, in a very nice way, gives his blessing for the girl and Kiyoshi to stay together. And when he goes to the train station, who's there but Kyo Machiko? And she obviously wants to get back together with him. And he's not comfortable with it at first. She persists. They play a little thing with cigarettes that's every bit as memorable. It's what Bette Davis and Paul Henri did in Now Voyager. And in a very simple gesture, he's willing to share the cigarette with her, and we know they will be fine. Once again, as is common in most Ozu movies, the important thing is acceptance. They've now accepted each other on a more mature level. Can they ever forgive the past? No. But what's one of the most important things about Japanese culture is that rather than the Western value of forgiving but not forgetting, in Asian culture, we choose to forget, but we don't forgive. And we see that that's what's happening here. They're going to choose to forget and go on to live in acceptance ever after. And isn't that, perhaps, in its own way, happiness?
もう一旗あげてみようか。
うん、やりましょう。やろうやろう。
やってみるか。
大丈夫や。やろうやろう。やりましょう。